Well, good evening. Welcome back. Episode 34 with Mike Woodson and Sue Graves and a wonderful guest. We're blessed to have Carlos Longo, and he is of his consultant firm, and he's got a long history. And so, myself and Sue are going to have a lovely conversation. So, welcome to Hospitality Tech Show, where we bring you to the intersection where technology meets hospitality, good marriage. So, welcome, Sue.
Hey, great to be here, Michael. And we'd like to thank our sponsors as well. We got WorkSource Montgomery, Integrity Restaurant Group, and IBM. Couldn't have the show without them. So thank you very much to our sponsors.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I've known Carlos for some time now, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Carlos, your background is amazing. It spans global infrastructure, financial systems, cybersecurity, SaaS, AI, hotel new builds, transitions, PIPs. If there's anything else in there that I missed, et cetera, I'll say. But you've got an amazing, diverse background. It's a remarkably broad view of how technology enables, enhances, slows down, even interferes with an organization. So we might cover a little bit of each, but I want to know, and I think our audience wants to know, what drew you to this work and what's kept you so passionate about it for more than 2 decades? Give us the story.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sue, for having me today. I'm the president of Lugatti Consulting Group, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to this place. So a quick story, and there's some additional background to this, but quick story is, we moved from the Dominican Republic when I was a child. I must have been like 12, 13 years old. My father decided, hey, we're going to move down to Orlando, Florida, because Disney is the next horizon. And he got a job at Disney doing bellman, right? And he picked up a part-time job at the Swan Hotel doing valet parking, which what we know today as the Walt Disney World Swan and Dolphin, with a third hotel now, which is the Swan Reserve, which I had a hand in that build as well from the beginning, but didn't quite finish that one because I'll tell you the rest of that in a minute. And so I used to go with my father after school on Fridays to pick up his check, whether it was because there was no direct deposit back in the early 90s, or maybe he just didn't have a bank. I have no idea. I didn't even know to ask, right? I was too worried about trying to learn English. How about that? And so then that turned into, hey, let's go to the bank and deposit the check or cash or whatever. But as we drove in every Friday and I would sit there and wait, I always was thinking to myself, like, wow, what a massive place. Like one day I'll work here. I just don't know what I'll do, but I'll work here one day. Fast forward 26 years. And there was I left the job around December timeframe of 2015. I was really tired of that situation. And after like 3 months of just sitting around doing nothing, my wife was like, Carlos, you're driving me crazy. You got to go get a job. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I got to get a job. So there was a job posting for a job at the Walt Disney World Swan and Dolphin as an IT manager. It wasn't even a director role. And I said, well, I'm doing all this enterprise stuff now. I came from academia. I was running all the IT projects. I was the director of the IT PMO at the Orange County Public Schools, the 9th largest district in the nation. I left that job, waited, landed this one. They call me and they basically say, hey, why don't you come walk the property? And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I'll land this job or not. I walk the property, I come back home, my wife asks, hey, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. And 2 days later, they call me, hey, you want to come back in? And I said, sure, why not? They made an offer. I say, hey, the hell with it. This will fill a dream. I don't know if I last here long enough because, being on a property wasn't something that I really have done, right? Um, and so to this point, I basically just say, I'm just going to go and find me another job. But the person that was over me that had brought me on, before I even turned my resignation, because I was going to go somewhere else, he said, "Hey, I'm leaving," and I said, "No way." And I said, "Okay, well, maybe I'll stick around." And so they offered me the promotion. 2 years after that, Marriott came in, acquired uh, Starwood Hotels, and I went through this whole transition of lifting and shifting the systems, working with all the Marriott IT and merging those. And throughout all of that, because of all the complexities we had in that place, um, they made me an offer to take a senior director role in for the Mid Atlantic region, which required for me to move my family, and we did all that. Within a year after that, pandemic hit, and somehow Carlos survived it, and I inherited the entire Northeast. So, so a few years doing that. Obviously, in combat with a lot of folks and building hotels, transitioning hotels in and out of the portfolio, management groups, different vendors, all these different synergies coming at me, and that's kind of how I got in, entrenched into the day to day. Now, prior to that, there was a foundational year, clearly, right? Because while I was with Marriott, I achieved a few things that a lot of people didn't, hadn't done before, like get my engagement scores 3 years in a row at 100%, right? Very difficult to have your entire team vote for you to have 100% engagement. Also got, different awards for leadership awards. And then when I took that transition role with the Mid Atlantic, something else kind of was put in front of me that I had no idea was going to happen, which was I was offered the opportunity to lead the IT roadshow for the global organization of IT, which meant that we were trying to recruit women into IT from our operations teams, whether it was reservations, food and beverage, room, etc. So I went around the country, basically setting up this in-person live webinars to recruit people from different disciplines, right? But the foundational years for me really came from working in large scale projects with Wyndham Worldwide. And even before going to the property, I was in hospitality, but I feel like my hospitality kind of got better embraced with being in combat at a property, dealing with it day to day, learning the pain points of your directors of food and beverage and your GMs and everybody else and the different attrition levels and all the things that they were doing manually and trying to digitize those things. So anyway, I'm saying all that to say that I think that was my training point and platform. Yeah. But the real hospitality really came full circle at Swan and Dolphin.
So interesting background in the way that you got there, kind of indirectly, but they say train them up and they, in the way they should go. So Dad did a good job of exposing you, right? So
right,
part of the the mission of this program is to really show the next generation that hey, there's a career in hospitality, and it may not take the traditional way. All right. We know that you go to college, etc. But in your case, it was kind of uniquely your dad kind of showed you something. It sparked an interest, right?
Right.
And would it be fair for me to say, if you see it, you can achieve it, right? Because that's your story.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and there's more to that. Like someone may ask, if we have any students or anybody that has aspirations of maybe getting into technology and hospitality, is that I remember, I was a college baseball player, played a little bit of pro ball in my glory years. And when I came out of that, my first job was as a guest services supervisor at a timeshare resort, right? Where I met my wife. And so I had nothing to do with IT. Yeah, I was just dealing with owners and dealing with problems
Mm.
and stuff like that. The one thing that I take back from that was every time like the phone didn't work or the computer or the printer, you put in a ticket, it would take these people forever to fix it. And so I thought, oh, maybe let me just fiddle with it, and a lot of times I will wind up fixing it. And
Wow.
that was like where I was like, well, maybe I'll just go to school to do IT work, because when I was actually going to school and I was a college student athlete, I really just wanted to be, if it wasn't baseball, I really wanted to be the trainer fixing these guys that are broken, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I had no idea that at some point all these will come and transition into what my life has been in the last 20 plus years.
Wow. Wow. So you really have taken, now here we are, fast forward 20 years, you Marriott, various, time sharing, and you've seen the change. Fast forward to where we are. Let's really go right into it. What about artificial intelligence? Right in the backyard, the change of what we see.
Yeah.
Changing and as such that it's operating at a fast pace. We're going into new school year. Students are coming in. Those that are maybe in their senior year, junior year, coming out. What would you say are the challenges that we're facing, and what given that impact of artificial intelligence?
Well, I mean, that's really, we could get really broad here, but I want to try to hone this down. If we're really want this next phase or next wave, right, of professionals coming in to hone in into what we need to be doing with that. Number one is understanding data structure,
Mm.
Mhm.
right? I think that the more we understand how the data is produced, how the data is stored, and how do we harvest that data, right, will make a whole lot of difference in how you approach on what you're trying to solve. Because a lot of times what happens is in our world today, and I'm just going to be very general here. We made, let's use Swan and Dolphin as an example. Big property, almost 3,000 rooms, 14 plus outlets, which means restaurants and bars and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
That's in
But
Orlando, right? That's
it,
Orlando.
yeah,
Right.
Orlando.
I stayed there. Beautiful property. Beautiful
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, and right in our backyard. I have a lot of friends there. Love the place. But like everybody else, you don't know where to start. Like, where do we begin, right? And the reality is we need to really start with the data, right? Do you own the data? Do you have access to the data? And is the data clean? Because if we're start creating outputs or creating AI agents or implementing AI agents to draw some of this data out and give me outputs that I'm looking for, is going to give me the garbage that I have in there too,
Yeah.
right? So like we ought to clean that up. So housekeeping, no pun intended, housekeeping is a major part of implementing or even creating a roadmap of launching or going in this endeavor. And I'm saying that because if I'm being honest, you can introduce something to help with your telecommunications, meaning like they can answer a lot of phone calls,
Mm.
transfer a lot of things. Okay, good. But when what happens when you transfer me, to say, to the restaurant group, and now I
Mm.
want to book a reservation with the group? Well, they're using a different agent. They're not using the same one as the telecom one, right? And then it not transfer me because now I want someone to refund because they charged me $500 extra, and I left and I didn't realize it. So 2 weeks later on my credit card statement, then now I got to call, and you're going to transfer me to their finance department. And now they got a different AI agent answering questions there. Now, all right, let's stop for a second. Three different disciplines, three different agents. How do we know they're all trained? How do we know they're all talking to each other? How do we manage them all? Right? So
Excellent points.
we
Um,
ought to be thinking about that. We ought to be thinking
mm.
about what we're introducing and what does that roadmap looks like, because it doesn't mean anything if we're standing here today if we don't know where we're going and we don't have a map to get there.
Yeah. So I love where you're going here. I just, when you talk about expectations and initiatives, like how do you, in your opinion, do you translate kind of a technology initiative, which we know there's a lot right now, into outcomes that, you know, a CFO or an owner or an asset manager can support? Like, how do you translate that initiative into something that they can support when they're each looking at different things? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, and keeping it within the hotel framework, right?
Yeah.
Every hotel always wants to save money, right? And so every single one of these leaders or departments that we're talking about, they're always tasked to find ways to save money. They're always tasked with ways that we need to make sure that we're being more efficient, and that we have visibility to the things that we either own or that we're actually implementing or that we're managing. And so when we talk about, let's say, a CFO has got this larger view of all these different departments that we need to streamline, and where can we save here, where can we save there, when we're already lean enough on staff, right? So then we need to start looking at that point at, well, number one, what are our standard operating procedures, and what are we doing right now to understand, you know, what our workflows look like? Because if we can find ways to streamline the workflows, and we can't streamline them anymore, the next thing is automation, right? And then from automation, then is, what does AI do? Is, you know, replicate and control. And so if we're going to be replicating something, what is the most repeatable things that we're actually doing, right? That we can then take away from these folks, and then they can actually then hyper enhance the way that we treat our guests, right?
So do we, like, what skills would you say to, you know, somebody entering the workforce now? What skills do they need? Is it change management? Is it, you know, you talked a lot about data and understanding the data, but if they're entering the industry now, like, what are some of the skills that people need now? I mean, even, you know, even talking about not necessarily people entering the workforce, but people in the workforce now that are going through this change.
Right.
So let me broaden that and just say, what skill is needed today, understanding the tremendous AI transformation that's taking place? What's the top 1, 2, or 3 skills that people need today?
Well, I will say people skills number one, if you're going to be in hospitality, right? People skills, hands down. Attitude, aptitude, right? I will take aptitude over anything, right? Because I could teach you a lot of these things, but if you're in the grounds of all these different change scenarios, what we don't know, Sue, is how is that being managed, right? Because most of these things could be killed on the adoption process, right? Like, if just because it was not even the right expectations were not set, that, hey, we're going to go through a little bit of pain to a much brighter future, right? Because there will be pain. You know, and someone once told me, and don't quote me on this, but in order for people to change, right, the pain to stay the same has to be greater than the pain to change, right? And so,
yeah, it's unfortunate, but that is a true statement. I agree. Most people don't. Yeah.
And so I'm saying right now is embrace it, right? Because change is inevitable. And the more that you embrace the change and approach it with curiosity, the better the outcome will be.
I love that word you're using, curiosity. And I also want to jump. I think that's really, really important, especially in today's age. People need to, you know, don't you like the word play too? Like, you got to be able to play with some of these free, you know, things that are out there, so you can get to know AI. It's kind of like a little buddy for you, and you're playing around with it, getting to know it, getting to feel comfortable with it. But at the end of the day, when you're making these transitions, you know, when you've done these transitions at a global level, help me understand what you think right now, in particular, in this day and age, the importance of property level leadership is to the success of implementation. How do you drive that?
It is paramount, right? It's absolutely paramount, because look, I get it. Like, property leaders, let's speak from a brand perspective, right? Not an independent, just from a brand perspective. The brands have a mandate, right? That things have to be done in a certain way by a certain standard, right? And, you know, the moment you have a leader that is saying yes to what is being, you know, cascaded from above, but completely poisoning everybody else at the property, saying this is not going to work, it will never work.
Right.
And so it has to be somebody, I'm not saying somebody that just totes the corporate line, but somebody that understands, right, why we're doing it and rallying the troops around it to win. Right.
So
Because
how did you do that? What are some secret sauce recipes? You did global rollouts, Carlos. I mean, like, and even in your region, it was huge. Like, how did you push that through? How did you drive engagement? I mean, I think that's the number one thing we need to talk about right now is like, nobody's talking about change management. Everybody's talking about the AI, but it's like, at the end of the day, if they're not adopting it, it's not going to work.
And let me just add to that, Sue. So we've gone from paper to digitalization.
Yep.
In addition to the technology. But now we're into analytics. And it's all focused on the guest experience, utilizing data. Their jobs have changed. You were in the business 20 years. 20 years ago, you're writing it down, right? Right? Carbon paper for the copy of the of the credit card. Now it's all digital, and the job has changed. So those people that are in it, how do you engage them to understand, to embrace that new talent and technology so they can survive in their job? And of course, in anything you do, you have to learn it. So how did you, and this is, I'm sure you do some consulting on that area from a people perspective. How do you do it? Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, let's take those two compounding questions because Sue is kind of ties into yours, Michael, which is how do you do the global rollouts? How do you get people's buy-in? How do you get engagement? Number one, you got to show up, right? If you don't show up, no one appreciates a leader that barks orders and doesn't come out to battle. Number one, people will respect that over anything else. People will respect the fact that I will walk into a room and say, I don't know anything about that, but I got the right person, right? I'm just here to make sure that we're not disrupting you, and we're minimizing the friction. How do we do that, right? Because I want to make sure that my team handles that, right? And if they can't do it, I'm on the hook for it. Number one, so take ownership of it and making sure that people understands that you're here to win with them, right? That you're not an adversary. And then how do you change that? I will tell you, Michael, that I go into places right now that I think the biggest challenge is not people adopting the technology. I think that the biggest challenge right now is the age gap, right? We have a lot of groups that are coming in, forget the generations, right? It's more of a, they have no people skills. And then you got this other older group that's here in their 50s and 60s, and they've already worked through all of that. And so they don't want the young group coming in, telling them what to do, but the younger crowd doesn't want to listen to what they got to say. Right. And
that's an interesting intersection. And so when you're looking at you're mixing it in the blender to have a perfect smoothie to make things smooth for the guest experience. So that inner working. So how do you bring them together? And I think that, it is, really a cohesive, it's a story of we, and you just can't have separate issues here. So management, would it be true? Can I just say that management now has to change their way? Because, we could break it down by Gen Zs versus the millennials, right? Or I'll even go further because some people, as you mentioned, they're post their careers and they're just, have a part-time or a position at the hospitality for whatever reason. And they're looking at that group of individuals who, by the way, may be managers. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I honestly, it comes back, and we always have to come back to leadership, right? They got to run the ship, right? They have to get everybody on it. For me, right, I always go back to matchups, right? I always try to get down to a social level with the people I work with to understand what makes them tick. It could be a dog, it could be a cat, it could be, a particular single malt, right? Because I'm a single malt guy. But things that, and then at that point I'm like, well, wait a minute, this lady here that runs housekeeping, right? And then this room's control lady they got a few things in common because I deal with both. So hey, hey, why don't we just go grab? They both love coffee, right? Oh, right. What do you like? But let's figure out a way to get them working together that has nothing to do with work,
Wow.
right? Because I think some commonality is super powerful, and so like it's just one of those that is not sometimes about the technology. Sometimes it's about how these people are viewing the
Mm.
world and who's the leader that's really running this ship. Is that leader engaged and wise enough to say, hey, we got a problem here and we need to fix it, and I need to get
Mm.
involved.
Yeah, so we're talking about a little bit of battlefield stuff here, at the property, but let's shift a little bit and talk about good technology governance.
Governance.
That's a word that's being used a lot right now. But what does
More
that look
AI
like?
governance.
Yeah, AI governance. Yeah, but technology governance, make it broader. But Carlos, so you've been through this, but what does it look like when a brand, a management company, an ownership group, and the property level team all has different priorities? Because I know you've been through that, but
Oh, you already know it.
yeah. So help me understand that. Help the audience understand that. What are you doing first?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, it's not my fault you signed a contract. Let's start there, right? You signed a contract, and now you're saying you don't want me to be telling you that this is the mandate that we need to push forward. And so, right, sometimes, this is the funny part of it is I'm just the guy that's here to make it work for you. And so, getting those leaders talking, and you never want to get down to the contract, honestly.
Right.
The moment you get into the contract, we're talking about a divorce almost. And so, we really ought to get down to, hey, let's talk about like, how do I help you navigate this, right? Because, at the end of the day, I got to work with the owner or the management company. And if I'm on the side of the brand when I was working for the brand, well, nowadays I don't work for the brand. So I spend a lot of time helping the owners of the management company, right, navigate through, hey, do we really need to do this?
Yeah.
And so from the brand side, well, a good example is, let's use Swan and Dolphin, right? Ownership works out of the property, right?
Yeah.
And I worked on property for the brand. And if the brand said, you need to go and get this done, and the ownership is saying, we're not approving that PO, we're not signing, we're not paying for it, right? Then at that point, all I got left to do is, hey guys, let's just get in a meeting. Hey, by the way, I gotta go to the bathroom. You guys stay right here. Work out. Because at the end of the day, I don't make that decision, and they got to figure it out, right? I got to move the team when it's time to move the team. And so, to be fair, though, my job on the brand side was always to explain to the ownership or the management company that the reasons why these things are happening, the reasons why they need to go in that direction, and if they refuse to do that, then at that point, as you already know, Sue, there are regional VPs of ops.
Yeah.
And then, that was the dotted line. And then I will grab the dotted line and say, hey, I think we need to take this person out for a nice glass of wine and have a conversation.
Yeah. So you hit the wine, you hit the coffee, chocolate's coming up. So here's the next conversational question. I'm going to shift us a little bit. You asked me to talk about new builds, transitions, PIPs. You've been a part of that as well. And I don't want to short you on this because this is a big deal, but you have a direct experience with hotel new builds and transitions and PIPs. And, 3 moments, right, when technology decisions can set a property up for success or create a huge expensive problem, right, for years to come. So what makes these situations uniquely challenging, and what are some steps that can be taken to help make sure that it's not a failure?
Well, number one, what I think needs to be avoided is most owners or hotel companies, management companies, they again, they're trying to save money, and so it's not a knock on them. But when you build a hotel, the first thing when you think about the construction site, the number one thing that comes to mind in my mind right away is I need a good foundation. I don't want this thing to crack at some point and not live the life of the asset. So when we think about a foundation from a construction perspective, we should be thinking about the same way about the technology and how do we best protect that technology for many years to come, which is your infrastructure, right? Low voltage cabling and the decisions that go up front and the budgeting piece of this are super important, because you don't want to get to a place that we didn't do those things ahead of time. And mind you, most of these hotels will take you 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the build, right? And so what we budget for today, initially, you cannot expect to be the same price 3 years from now when you're getting ready to procure, right? And so, the biggest mistakes that most of them make is that they think hey, we've built all these hotels before, but you keep making the same mistake, right? You're not get somebody to make sure that your technological foundation is lit from jump the right way to do it, and then you future looking at what things are going to be. Someone could tell you, oh, there's no such a thing as future proofing. You're right. There's no guarantee that tomorrow there won't be an earthquake. It seems like we got one every week everywhere now, and it's going to crack the foundation. No, you're right. There's no way to future proof this, but I can tell you that I can guarantee your cabling job for 30 or 40 years if we do it right. I could tell you that, if we build it IT centric, meaning that we create the right pathways, that we have all of those things on top of mind and in front of us, that you don't have to value engineer it down the road because now you forgot that you needed to do all these other things, or you decided I'm just going to let my GC sub out everything else, right? To then find out, oh, well, they did it all wrong. Told you. Now it's going to cost you 3 times more, right?
You're doing something different, though, Carlos. We talked about it pre-show. Talk about your digital twin you're creating to help map this out and create a great roadmap. I think this is awesome. This is great.
Yeah. So, but before he goes there, let me just ask this question about that and back to that planning stage. Corporate planning versus, say, a franchise. How does that play into that in terms of trying to build a hotel, and from those two lenses?
I don't think it changes much. I think the only difference for me, right, in my experience, is that from the corporate side, they have a new builds team, right? The new builds team, the owner or the management company has got this owner that's going to fund it. They got the funding for it. But then if you go through the new builds team, they're going to charge you 3 times more than someone like me will charge you. Right? By the way, the corporate team has got hundreds of property in flight. I got maybe 4 or 5 in flight. So my level of detail will be a lot greater, right, than the other, right? And so, plus it will cost you a lot less, right? So if you charge $300,000 to do this, well, Carlos is probably 30%, 60% cheaper, right? And so that's one. But to Sue's point of what we were talking about earlier is almost everything is on the cloud. Everything is API now, integrated. And well, the things that we're doing now is, okay, well, if we're doing a cloud PBX, cloud PMS, cloud POS, and we're doing everything through the cloud, we got to design, the hotel, the room extensions, the room counts, make sure that none of the rooms actually match the same number, that we don't have the same prefix number, that we're doing all these different things. So what we're deciding to do now is, is everything going to be cloud-based? When we get to procurement, we're doing all the design integration on the cloud. So but the hotel's about to get ready to go live, right? Then at that point, we just need internet there, right? And what they call the blue line is what they used to call it. So you get your router connected to all your system and your switching gear, and you're up and running with a little bit of fine tuning here and there, obviously, because you're on the ground. Things gotta work the right way. But for the most part, I don't see why we just don't do this more often now, right? We design the hotel on the cloud, do all the integrations in the cloud, and then we just light up the hotel.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And so but all this changing as individuals who one day want to own their own hotel. So for example, I've met somebody at Howard University. They're dreaming of, they're going to leave Howard. They're going to go out into the industry. They want to own their hotel. How do you kind of parlay that down to the student level and set those expectations so that they can understand what they're in for? Is there some way for them to kind of get, input, educated on what that would look like as an owner so they can understand reality versus fiction?
Yeah, well, someone like Sue can answer this better than me for sure, but I'm going to tell you right now, they need to work in a hotel and they need to work every discipline, number one, right? You want to be a hotel owner? Well, if you were born into a load of cash, well, listen, it's no better way to play Monopoly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I will say you need to know the business, number one, because I will say there are properties that print cash, but there are not too many that print cash, right? Mm-hmm. And so the reality is the hotels operate in very, very tiny margins of profits, right? And so it's not like you're getting this huge payout, right? Like you get some that obviously they stop printing money so they can print theirs first. Mm-hmm. But again, there's not too many of those, right? You got 8,000 of them. Well, maybe about 50 of them are printing cash. And if one of those sneezes, then the rest of that region suffers, right? When it comes to when you're actually looking at the region and how you're performing. And so that will be my advice. Number one, work every discipline, understand how the business works. And then two, understand the economics of selling and buying a hotel, right? Mm. Because just because you do your due diligence, right? There's so many people, right, that make the same mistake. I just got a phone call the other day. There's this big purchase going on here. I won't say where, but right here in Tampa. And essentially they call me and they're like, hey, we want you to do a kind of like a pre-discovery before we actually engage is whether we want to buy this property on the technology and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, great. Well, look, but we need it in 2 days from today. Can you be on the ground? I'm like, I can be, but that means I got to stop a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm doing. Right. So let me send you a proposal and then you let me know, right? But this happens too often. Send a proposal, you don't hear back, right? Mm. Okay, did you really need it? Or are you going to make the same mistake you keep making every time you buy a hotel to find out that, hey, number one, if you're going to flip the flag on that, you can't have the same infrastructure that this brand has. Number two, right, are you going to buy something that already comes with a PIP, right, which is a property improvement plan that maybe whoever signed that PIP before they sell it, they should fulfill it or be part of that deal, that you don't have to eat that cost, and maybe it's negotiated that deal, and then maybe my fee comes out of that deal, right? And so there's so much that's going on when it comes to that, but the same mistake happens way too often. And I would just say, if you're wanting to get into a place that you want to own, start going to investment summits, right? Mm-hmm. At least go to one. And I can name a few. So you probably go to some of these. Alice is one of them. Yeah, Alice is great, which is the American Lodging Investment Summit. And they host one here for CALA, for Central America and Latin America. There's quite a few. The Lodging Conference is another one. There's a very good one. And so there's so many good ones that you could go to and learn from that will actually teach you what are the economics, what are the things that do you want to buy something that is a full service hotel? Do you want to buy an extended stay hotel and why? Do you want to buy a hotel that's near an airport and why? Like there's all these reasons why you should probably stay away from it and maybe not, right?
So I want you to give me like a short bullet point on this if you can. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about hotel transitions, and we talked about you wanting to have some space in there for this because it's so important. You're the incoming operator. Prioritize the first 30, 60, 90 days. Give me like a bullet point on each one. Like, hey, Sue, if you were the incoming operator, here's the top 3 things you need to do in the first 30 days, the first 60, the first 90. Like, we don't need the whole plan. Just what are some bullet points that people can capture, little nuggets?
Well, number one, I would just want to make sure that we go through an entire audit of our systems, people that got access to the systems, right? Anything that's we're looking at end of life support, any contracts, right? That we may be month to month, that we may be paying a lot of stuff, right? So like things that we're definitely looking at to save costs and improve the operations, but that we don't want to expose ourselves because we may be under contract, right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we went and signed this contract and we're duplicating instead of saving because we can't get out of one and we just already executed the other one. So those are the things that we were probably focused the most in the first 30, 60 to 90 days is how do we tighten up security to make sure that people that are not supposed to have access to the systems are taken out of there. Look at vendor access, who's no longer there, why should they be having access to the systems, and how do we implement that? A better process. What are our SOPs for standard operating procedures when we lose internet, when we lose power, things of that nature that nowadays people doesn't know how to even work. If we lost it today,
well, look, Carlos, we could go on and on.
Yeah, I could go on and on.
I'll tell you, it has been a pleasure having you on the show, and really, and I got to have you back because you know, it's like being at the Apollo in New York. You know, the music is played. And then
I know we didn't even get into pips. I mean,
we didn't get into the pips, and so the performance of that. So yeah, it's really been great. To our audience, thank you for willing to be here with us as you get the opportunity to learn. And this is what this is all about here at the Hospitality Tech Show. We're at the intersection of technology meets that of hospitality, together with. Sue Graves, my lovely co-host. And I want to thank our lovely Kim, our lovely producer, for bringing this all together. And to our sponsors, we thank you as well. And I want to correct myself. It's episode 35. Time flies when we're having fun. So please do join us. Also, feel free to send us comments at the Hospitality Tech Show. That's info at hospitalitytech.org. And by the way, thank you to our sponsors, the Work Source Montgomery Group and the Integrity Restaurant Group, and of course, IBM. We thank you. Until next time, same channel here at the Hospitality Tech Show. I'm Michael Woodson. Good day.
I'm Sue Graves.
Yes. And thank you, Carlos. All right.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you for having me.